This is the Connect Podcast, where business meets leadership. We talk with influential newsmakers, business leaders, and decision makers important to New York's economy.
Comptroller DiNapoli, thank you for being here. Really appreciate you taking the time. Our inaugural taped podcast in our studio. So
that's an honor for me
yeah.
to be the first. That's great. I love it.
Well, I'm so glad you're here, and I really appreciate it. It's a really great timing, right? Yesterday was the State of the State. Yeah. This will live on, of course, and so that particular highlight won't be relevant after the budget's out anyways. Right. But let's talk. I wanted to talk first a little bit about your background because it's really interesting. You were elected at a very young age.
18.
Yes.
Senior in high school. Yeah, it was a interesting time in the country. A lot of divisions.
Not like now.
Not like now,
yeah.
right. Yeah. And I came of age in the late 60s, early 70s with all the different movements, obviously coming out of the civil rights era and the environmental movement, the women's movement, what was back then called the gay liberation movement, and of course the Vietnam War and the challenges that presented for many people. And folks today may not remember, but back then you had to be 21 to vote, 18 to buy a drink.
Oh, wow.
We flipped it.
You did
yeah.
so, oh, wow,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So the real impetus, though, for changing the voting age was young men, it only applied to men, were eligible for the draft.
Right.
So you were drafted for a very unpopular war. And many young people said, we would like to have a say in what's going on. Yeah. So that was the impetus for lowering the voting age from 21 to 18. And I grew up on Long Island, as you know,
yep.
in a Nassau County, in a wonderful family, extended family close by, conservative Republican neighborhood, household. And with all of this upheaval going on, I found that I was drawn to the idea of public service politics as a way to make the world a bit better. And certainly I was inspired by the Kennedys, were very big inspirations for me in terms of the voices that resonated. Because there was a lot of, where are we headed? Where are we going? Again, similar to today. So I got active in school stuff. I was the school president. Probably no surprise, right? And I started going to school board meetings.
Yeah. So you must have been a good student, I'm guessing.
Well, I was a good student. I won't say I was a great student, but I did well enough. Yeah, I was in the high 80s. I was good. I was good. French was always tough. What can I tell you?
So my mom was a French teacher.
Oh,
so we could conduct the rest of this in French if you like.
I wish I could. I've come to appreciate the language more in later years than when I had to study it. But I started going to school board meetings. I didn't like some of the stuff that was going on. I felt the student voice was not being listened to. We were kind of closed out of decision making. And so the year I was graduating high school was the year 18-year-olds could vote.
Oh.
And to run for school board, the qualification was you had to be a resident of the district for 30 days, a U.S. citizen, and qualified voter.
Okay.
So we said, we need to change things a little bit. And all you need to do is get a petition with 25 signatures.
Awesome.
So literally got 25 signatures relatively easily.
But you won.
And I won. So I had that weird experience, Heather, where the very first time I voted for myself. Who has that experience? And by the end of the evening, I won. So I was the first 18-year-old in New York State elected to anything. And that's really what launched my involvement. School board is not partisan, so I wasn't running as a Democrat.
Right.
But it gave me a taste of electoral politics as being a pathway to make a difference.
Right.
I spent 10 years on the school board, got active in Democratic politics along the way, and but I was getting.
So did you go right from that to the Assembly?
No.
No. Okay.
No. So I graduated. So the reason I ran for school board because a bunch of us were talking about somebody running, and I ended up as the one to run because I stayed home for college. I was going to Hofstra, commuting to Hofstra. Everybody else was going away. So
you drew the short straw, or
I
don't know. You won.
When we first started, we just wanted to spark interest. Nobody thought we could win. I didn't think we could win. So I got my BA in history while I was on the school board, and then I had, school board's not a full-time job, so I started working. I had worked summers as a telephone operator.
Oh, my grandmother did too.
There you go.
Not just summers. She worked for Ma Bell in New York City.
My dad was a 40-year Ma Bell. He was a lineman, and so we had telephone in our blood. And so when I graduated, the original plan was to be a high school history teacher. That never that kind of changed course at a certain point. My father wanted me to be a lawyer. I didn't want to be a lawyer. So I actually ended up trying to find myself, went back to AT&T, and ended up in a management training program. And so I actually spent 10 years in the private sector, largely because of that school board election, and then later on in the assembly, I'm often introduced as a lifelong public servant, a politician. So I really had another life too. So I had 10 years in the private sector. And when I did have the chance to run in 1986 for the state assembly. My predecessor was a wonderful legislator, a trailblazer in her day, May Newberger. Back then, she was one of the few women members of the assembly. And she was a great role model and mentor. She retired, although she only stayed retired for a year or two. Then she ran for town office, became our town supervisor. But in Nassau County at the time, it was very hard for a Democrat to be elected to anything.
Right.
So the assembly seat was one of the few seats. May was a Democrat that Democrats could win. It was marginally Republican, but a lot of independent voters. So I was just finishing up my master's at that point, because my path was to be in corporate work, and I wanted to do human resources work, labor relations. So I actually got a master's at the New School, what was then called the New School for Social Research in New York City. Back in the day where the company paid for it. Remember, it used to be very generous tuition programs.
A lot of our members still do tuition reimbursement.
It's very important for employee development and retention. And certainly for me, it was a big plus. So I was just finishing up my master's, and I was really at that point because I actually had just gotten a promotion. I was managing my own office, actually out on Long Island. I'd been in the city for a number of years working, but then I was back on the island, and I had like that one of those crossroads. Do I stay with the path I was on, where it's kind of happy, or do I follow that dream that had always been there to do public service, do elective office? And obviously, I made the choice to run. Much to my parents' chagrin, they were not thrilled about you're giving up a secure job with a big corporation.
Oh, look at you, blowing your future,
blowing it all for doing that. No less as a Democrat, So. But obviously, it kind of worked out.
Well, we found something from your first session. So Ken Bukowski, who works here, he has been at the Business Council over 40 years. And he saves all of these legislative digests that give all the bills that were introduced during that session. And so we found the first bill that you introduced.
Oh, my.
And I will tell you what it is.
I hope it was a good one.
Oh, very good. It's Assembly Bill 1719, amends the vehicle and traffic law prohibiting right-hand turns within 500 feet of a school.
That's a very good bill.
It is, but it never made it out of committee.
How dare they?
Yeah, I know. We have not looked, to see if future versions of it passed, but it did not pass your first year.
Wow.
But anyways, we found the bill, and kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, my interest actually was always more at the local level, municipal government.
Yeah.
Which never worked out for me, by the way. I ran for town office, I ran for county office, and I've ended up on the state track. But once I got past that first session, which was kind of tough. I mean, remember, I went from a corporate environment where there were very clear definition of policies, procedures, rules, who to go to if you had a question. You got a straight answer, and you come into Albany in the state legislature where it's kind of like the Wild West. And I had a struggle the first year because I was like, what the?
So my first session was 85.
Oh,
I worked
okay,
for Mike Bragman.
Yeah.
86, I worked for Greg Young.
Okay.
Yeah.
Served with them both. Yeah.
I was there in 87 for Greg Young again.
Yeah.
and worked part-time during law school. But
Yeah.
I remember when you were in the Assembly.
Yeah, and once I got past that first year, it was great after that, because then I realized in the legislature, if you want to work at it, I suspect it might have been your experience as well, you actually can get things done.
Yep.
You know, it's interesting. Some legislators are more focused on what they do back home. So they go to all the events. They focus on getting grants, for different organizations, constituent service, visibility. And they don't do too much in Albany. And you have other legislators, they're going to rewrite the history of the world so that all they focus on is legislation in Albany
Yeah.
and the great bills. Don't do much back home. They have their staff take care of that. I always try to, and I always say the best legislators are the ones that do both.
Yeah.
Have your legislative agenda be very clear and work at it. And if you work at it, you can get things done. You can get bills passed. But don't ignore back home. And my advice always for new legislators, especially your first term, put your priority on back home. You get limited staff, as you know, in the beginning.
Yeah.
I don't know what the numbers are today. Put most of your staff in the district. Make sure when people call, they get an answer.
Right.
And my experience was, even if you can't resolve whatever the issue is in the way that the constituent wants, as long as they know you're trying and you're listening, that's all they want. They want to be heard. But once you get established in the district, then spend a little more time, build up your staff, and don't ignore the ability to make a difference through legislative proposals and debating bills and so on. So I enjoyed doing both, and I had a terrific staff both in Albany and in the district, and we did a lot, and especially in later years when I became a committee chair, it took a while to get the seniority for that. And obviously, as a chair, you have a little more influence. My last few years, I chaired the Environment Committee, so that was a lot of fun. Those issues are very big.
You were there 20 years?
It's hard to believe.
Yeah.
When I first got there, I said, all right, I'll do this for 10 years. I actually took a leave from AT&T because I wasn't necessarily
Because you're going to go back, right?
Yeah.
That was the plan.
Well,
Yeah.
I wasn't sure I'd get reelected, too, so I was kind
Yeah.
of a safety, a little bit of my parents' depressionary mentality, I always have to have a
Backup plan, yeah.
contingency. But, so I always thought, I'd do it for 10 years and then do something else. And 10 years became 20 years.
Didn't Andrea Stewart Cousins, the Senate Majority Leader, also work for telecommunications?
Yes, it's so interesting you say that. So we were getting to know each other on, I think it was a trip to one of the national conventions. We both had aisle seats on the plane, and we were talking, and we stumbled on the fact that we both had experience with AT&T. So I took that as a good sign that we had that experience. And I've reached a point in life where I'm actually collecting my little deferred pension from AT&T.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Well, how about that? You don't seem old enough to be collecting
Well,
a pension.
I was there long enough to be vested. That's why I always say when people say, "Oh, all he's ever done is politics," well, tell that to the people who are sending me a little pension from AT&T.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's interesting we mentioned that company. I was there when it was Ma Bell.
Yep.
I was there when divestiture happened, and I was elected to the Assembly shortly after divestiture, and to see the dramatic change, and even change in corporate culture. And now, of course, we're in an era where we're seeing like a reconsolidation of phone companies. So it's a fascinating. It was just a fascinating evolution, and you could argue both ways whether the old way of doing it with a regulated monopoly made more sense than what we have now. And there are pluses and minuses both ways.
Yep.
But from a corporate study point of view, it was a fascinating time. And I should mention, which is one reason why, in terms of the work we do, I've always viewed, people debating diversity all the time these days, right? To me, it's not a negative. The reason I mentioned earlier, it was a telephone operator, is that AT&T was one of the companies that was subject to a lot of lawsuits back in the day, because you had very clear positions that were women positions, that were male positions,
Yep.
and shock of shocks, the male-dominated positions paid a lot more money,
Yeah.
more of a career path. The women ended up being customer service reps or telephone operators. I mean, the operators were all women at one time.
Yep.
And so as a consequence of the changing attitudes about equal opportunity, the company made a conscious effort to have more women in what have been traditionally men positions,
Yep.
male dominated, and more men in women. So I ended up as a I hate to
as
put
an
it-
operator.
as an
Yeah.
operator,
Yeah.
in a sense of diversity opportunity. So to me, diversity helps everybody. It just creates new pathways and new opportunities, and that's how you get maximum potential out of everybody. So I've always felt that way in terms of our organization. Now that we're running an agency, that despite all the politicization of that discussion, I mean, my personal experience, and certainly my experience in running the Comptroller's office, 2,800 employees, having a diverse workforce is great. That's how you get talent from
Yeah.
all quarters, and so I mean that So to me, that it's interesting in terms of how you open up the question in ways that I probably appreciate now more than a few years ago. That private sector experience
Yeah.
still informs me in terms of my thinking and what I do as a manager. And I got that master's degree in human resources management, and then I got elected to the Assembly about the same time. And I was like, okay, well, I'm never going to use that. Well, then I end up running an agency of 2,800 people.
Right.
And I said,
So it
wow.
turns out, yeah.
It turns out,
Yeah.
so I always say to people, whatever, especially as far as education, you can never get too little in terms of education. And you
Yes.
never know when certainly an educational credential or a work experience is going to have relevance down the road. So I've in a way, my years in the private sector and that graduate education was helpful, and certainly.
I mean, personal viewpoint,
Yeah.
I think folks who have worked in the private sector in general make better public sector leaders because you understand the interplay.
Yeah.
And you also understand that there are different ways that you can do things
Yeah.
and structure things. And
Yeah.
if I can make a little plug for some New York private sector companies, I mean, I think the idea of paid vacation and the Social Security system
Yeah.
is based on the IBM pension system.
Right.
IBM was asked by the federal government to help them structure something like their pension, and that's how we end up with Social Security. The idea of paid vacation also, I think, is IBM and boy, whoever the company is, if
Right.
it's not IBM, it's going to be
Right.
really ticked off, and I apologize,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. But these are things that were private sector ideas initially to keep employees, to reward employees, to create longevity in the workplace, because if someone works for a place a long time, Ken Pikowski here being the greatest example, the institutional knowledge and the ability to inform people as they come in
Yeah.
is really helpful. Now, the people who are here for a long time have to be flexible and
Yes.
be willing to change
Yeah.
with the times, and the better you are at that, the
Yeah.
better you do.
And the times do change. But I think another piece, Heather, that I worry sometimes is getting lost is, and again, part of it is having been in a business environment that was part of a regulated monopoly for most of the years I was there. That sense of loyalty of both the corporation to the employee and
Yep.
the employee back to the corporation, I think sometimes that gets lost in the modern era, and I worry a little bit about that, because I think I think companies should expect, and the same thing with a government or a nonprofit employer as well, should expect the best from their employees. But there has to be a sense of loyalty back from the employer, whether it's private
Yeah.
or public,
Yep.
back to the employee in terms of how they're treated, benefits, as you were just talking about.
Yep.
And I worry too, what's the big topic, right? Everybody's talking about artificial intelligence, AI, what will it mean?
Right.
We just did this report on 18 to 34-year-olds in New York and all the challenges that they're facing in terms of costs. And New York, compared to the national trends, we have a shrinking percentage of our population in that 18 to 34-year-old category, different from most other states. But one of the other big challenges is AI already is limiting the number of entry-level jobs that are available to the next generation. So I worry about, in an effort to be cost efficient, using AI so heavily could create other kinds of dislocations in terms of career path that we want, and opportunity, especially for our younger members of our community.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a conversation with a former assemblyman who's now a congressman. I won't name him but we had a little debate between us as to whether or not automation was going to cause a
Yeah.
huge problem with the workforce and create a lot of displacement. And my argument at the time was, you need, when you have automation, and I think the same is true of AI,
Yeah.
you need people who understand how to run that.
Right.
Because they're not fully autonomous. At the time, I never factored in the demographic issue that we're facing. We have a workforce cliff that I read something probably 3 or 4 years ago that if we don't change the trajectory on population, and whether it's opening up to more immigration or getting people who aren't currently in the workforce back into the workforce, if everything remained the same, we'd have a huge loss of GDP.
Yeah.
Because the people aren't there.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
the baby boomers, as they retire,
Yeah.
they're this big blob of people.
Right.
Their kids aren't as big a blob.
Right.
This blob's not the right word, but
We get the concept.
but there's fewer people who have to be working to
Right.
support paying into Social Security, paying into the economy,
Yeah.
and providing
Yeah.
the GDP and the productivity to keep our economy just even. So there's some benefit from
Yeah.
automation and AI, but they're not the same jobs,
They're not the
right?
same
The
jobs.
entry-level jobs
Yeah.
are not the same as programming a robot,
Right, right.
or a computer. And so workforce is so important. I mean, I think.
But adaptations will have to happen. I mean, we were talking earlier about, was it your grandmother was a telephone operator?
She
Right?
was.
And I was a telephone operator.
She started working when she was 16.
Yeah.
And she was there. I have her. She's like pioneers.
Oh, sure, telephone pioneers.
Yeah.
My dad
I
was a
have-
telephone
I have-
pioneer.
I
Yeah.
have the certificate in my
I love
office.
it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
But how many telephone operators are there today?
Right. Zero.
Zero.
Yeah.
Yeah, zero. Press zero for operator. They don't. Those jobs don't. When I was, there were thousands of operators just based in New York. Those
Right.
jobs are just not there anymore. So adaptations happen, and I do think that you two excellent points, in terms of immigration and not having enough people in the workforce. That's why it's unfortunate we have such a polarized political debate on this now. It's
yeah.
terrible.
I agree.
We see now, whether it's in hospitality or agriculture, very important part of our economy in the state, the impact of this of how immigration is being handled is really having a very, very negative effect. And child care should not be a politicized issue, because if we want more people in the workforce, we've done reports on it, everybody's done analysis on the cost and the child care deserts and difficult access of opportunity and quality child care, particularly for women, holding them back, not enabling businesses to recruit the best and the brightest if certain people can't be in the workforce. That's why that issue is so important. I think it's good, as you know, the governor has made a big, has been talking about it for not just this year,
Yep.
but certainly has stepped it up this year, and, a lot of discussion with New York City's proposals and so on. I think that may be an answer to part of what you put out there, is that if we in fact do a better job of providing those child care options, that will help expand the talent pool that'll be available. And hopefully at some point we'll get back to a thoughtful discussion on immigration and stop this
Yeah.
madness that we seem to be going through
I mean,
now.
I think there, at some point, it's got to give, right?
Yeah.
When you start looking at overall the rate, the childbirth rate in the
Yeah.
U.S., and it's now below 2.1, which is the replacement rate, right?
Yeah.
To stay even.
Yeah.
So that means declining population.
Yeah.
And declining population is not a good thing for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
We built our infrastructure for the population that's here now,
Yeah.
or the anticipated future population.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of infrastructure, a lot of things that need to be maintained. You want to maintain your GDP.
Yeah.
You need people working
Yeah.
and producing. And, I think immigration is, to me, one of the most obvious solutions. This is a country where all around the world people want to live here.
Yeah.
They think of this as a place of opportunity. And I think we've made it it does not seem like a friendly place right now,
Not right now.
to immigration.
No.
And that's really unfortunate.
But all these issues, that we're talking about, Heather, it underscores the importance of the role of the Business Council, your role as president of it, to really inform the discussion on all these. Because, at the end of the day, we need a strong economy in New York.
Yes.
And we have a strong economy, but there are stress points, there are challenges. We haven't even touched on the regional differences that are significant in our state. You see it all the time.
Yeah.
So I think from my experience, what you produce here at the Business Council, you and your team, very thoughtful analysis and really tries to get everybody focused on some of those bigger trends that are out there, because we do need a strong economy. We do need a strong private sector. And, we have these wonderful regional chambers and local chambers across the state, but you're really the Chamber of Commerce for the entire state. And that's a very unique and powerful platform.
Well, thank you. I wish we had more influence with the legislature sometimes. I mean, I think, and you've done some really great reporting on, for example, the unemployment insurance issue that, we had a resolution last year, which was amazing.
But the Business Council were the first ones to raise it.
Yes.
And remember we did, I think, 2 reports on it,
Yep.
really very much inspired by our conversations. And at the end of the day, it was viewed as a win for business,
Yes.
for labor.
Yes.
It was viewed as a win all around. It took a while to get there,
It did.
but it was a smart decision. It took New York longer to do what other states had done, but it also is allowing now for the benefit levels to go up. So it was a win-win-win all around.
Yeah, it was, and I think when we work in partnership, in particular, your office has been really, really helpful in data. And I know that, people want information on a hot second.
Right.
Want to know right this second. But
Right.
if you look at long-term trends in New
Yeah.
York, UI was one point. It's a drag, right?
Yeah.
When you have $7 billion that's being paid back as an additional tax
Right.
by business, it's a drag on the economy. I think we agree that the financial services sector is critical to New York's
Absolutely.
economy.
Yep.
They are the largest contributor to New York's GDP. Unlike every other state, where, if you go to Alaska and energy is their hot sector that produces the most for the state.
Yeah.
New York has a sort of a hostile orientation towards Wall Street, towards the folks who work in
Yeah.
financial services.
Yeah.
And we're losing in the growth.
Yeah.
Right? These are sectors that are growing, but we're losing to other states,
Yeah.
Florida and Texas in particular.
Yeah.
And how do we get a focus on basically the importance of growing the number of jobs in that sector rather than
Yeah.
just increasing how much we take from them?
Yeah. But I think you touched on something very important, because sometimes the critics say we're losing all these jobs, like there's a net loss. In fact, we're not losing jobs. It's to your point, we're not growing though. That's the problem.
Right.
The growth is absolutely happening in Texas. Now, look, to a certain extent, the jobs are going to follow the wealth. I mean, more people are the whole issue of taxpayer migration as well is an impact
Right.
on this.
Right.
So that's part of it. But I do think when you talk to some of the folks in financial services, and it may be a harder thing to measure, it's not necessarily a hard data point, but you do get a sense that they feel that there's not a commitment to keeping New York as the global capital for finance. Right. Whatever that may mean, it may mean different things to different people. But that's what I always say, whether you love Wall Street or you hate Wall Street, and that's a way oversimplified equation that I just laid out. We have to recognize, you mentioned contribution to GDP for the state, but it's about 20% of the revenue that
Right.
we use to spend on education, healthcare, and senior programs and everything else. That you can't replace that if we lose that.
Right.
And I think one reason why we still have as many jobs as we have is thankfully New York is still the place, especially New York City, that young folks want to be. It's where people with entrepreneurship and creativity want to be. But for many of these businesses, at a certain point, there is a bottom line analysis that has to be made.
Yeah, when you have, the governor of Florida flying up here and talking one-on-one to someone and saying, laying out in front of them, here's how much money you will save
Right.
in your own taxes
Right,
if you
right.
move your residence and your business to
Right,
Florida.
right.
But I think sometimes what gets left out of the conversation is if you need new revenue, and revenue pays for a lot of really good things, a lot of really good programs that improve the quality of life. And I have a follow-up point I want to mention on that and see if we can agree on something. But there are 2 ways you can grow revenue. You can increase the rate, how much you're taking from the people who are paying right now, or you can increase the number of people who
Right.
are paying.
Right.
I would rather do that, leave
Yeah.
the rate alone.
Right.
And grow the sector and grow the industry and, particularly the highly comped positions. because you can leave the personal income tax rate alone and collect more in personal income
Sure.
taxes if you have more people paying
Yeah,
or
yeah.
making more money.
Yeah.
And so, but the thing I was hoping that you and I could agree on is I have this thought that sometimes we spend a lot of money in New York on things. We don't do as well in terms of results as some other states do for what we spend. Public education being one of them. I get it, it's a tough political issue, but we do spend a lot more than every other state. We don't outperform them. I think we should look at why. I think we should ask ourselves, why do we spend $20,000 per pupil in New York and we're getting beat by states that are only spending $10,000 per pupil? Why is it that our healthcare is a third more expensive in New York? Why is childcare off the charts in terms of expense versus the next highest state? We should be looking at how can we do better with the money that we are spending.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's not been a lot of that reflection, except for in the area of economic development, which has been put under a microscope 6 ways to Sunday, right?
Yeah.
But I don't understand why in the two biggest categories of spending in particular, health and education,
yeah.
we don't do any kind of real world evaluation of how the money is spent.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a big question that you pose, and I think you're right in that we should be more unafraid to ask those tough questions. I'm like, New York is a more expensive place to do anything. I mean, that's just the
Right.
reality of
Yeah.
the economics, and New York's generosity in terms of employee compensation and benefits, is more so than many other states. But my perspective, especially being in the controller role, where auditing is a big part of what we do, there are always opportunities to still get good results without depriving people of services, but do it in a more cost-effective and efficient way.
Yeah.
And I think there has been a tendency to especially when budgets are being put together, to just add on to whatever you spent last year.
The incremental budget, yeah. What did we spend
I mean,
last
the
year?
zero-based
Yeah.
budgeting used
Yeah.
to be a big,
I like
buzz phrase.
performance-based budgeting
Yeah.
as a theory,
Right,
right?
right,
It's scary
right.
to agencies. It's scary to anyone who's receiving the funds because you have to show
Yeah.
what you did with it. But in the economic development world, I mean, going back 15, 20 years, we were able to look at some programs that weren't working
Right.
and eliminate
and
them.
eliminate them.
So-
yeah. And look, I mean, especially with education, there's a lot to unravel there in terms of results. Why, the whole discussion of public schools versus charter schools, and it gets very complicated. It's not an easy analysis. I do think though on healthcare, especially because of the federal cuts that are coming down, we really do have to be more thoughtful about whatever Medicaid dollars that we have. It's a very important program. A lot of our, as you know, the safety net hospitals are in tough shape, be it in New York City or rural New York. We do audits all the time that point out opportunities to save money without denying people services. There are so many inefficiencies. It's such a big system. It's not as well managed as it should be. So, I mean, to your point, I've always felt we have to be more thoughtful about how we're spending the money that we have. And I think with the cuts that are coming down, it's going to require us to be more thoughtful.
Yeah.
And I guess I would look more to the healthcare area as an opportunity. I mean, education, I'm a Long Islander, right? So one of the big issues on Long Island, we have all these school districts and we could save money if we,
I have an idea about that.
Okay.
I have a crazy idea.
Okay.
I did pitch it to somebody in a prior administration on the second floor, and
they ran the other way?
I feel like this is one of those things, like you could only really do a major change in how you fund public education if you were either a first-term governor or you knew you were not trying to get reelected, right? But no, my idea was there's so much money that comes from the state side. Rather than doing the formula the way they do it, have the state take over the payroll. So the personnel costs. I mean, they're already part of the state retirement system, right? The healthcare, the school districts already have the option of participating in the state health plan. A lot of them don't. But instead of having 500 and something or 600 different contracts, have 5, go by region, have the personal and by the way, give the teachers portability of tenure, right? So that,
Oh, that's interesting.
you
which
could
they don't
move.
have now. Yeah.
Right, which
yeah.
they don't have now. Levelize the compensation
Right.
between districts,
Right.
maybe provide some additional compensation in the districts where, kids are starting from a different point, they're more economically challenged. But, you could smooth out a way to finding more choice maybe within counties. I'm not saying vouchers, I'm
Right.
saying just, create choice
Yeah.
within the counties like
Yeah.
there is some degree of in New York City.
Yeah.
And you could create something that is more equitable for the students because, right now there are some districts that severely underperform others for a
Yes.
lot of reasons.
Yeah, yeah.
My theory is that kids need to be exposed to kids from, different levels of wealth, different demographic
Yeah,
backgrounds,
yeah.
and it benefits them all the way through.
Yeah.
But I know it's like a very challenging
Yeah,
thing.
I was going to say if you're launching your bid for governor, you're probably not going to get elected.
I'm not
on
going to
that
get
platform.
elected. I know. And by the way, my parents are both retired public school teachers. So, I mean, I grew up in a union,
Yeah.
teacher-driven, very union-friendly household. I don't view this as being contrary to the unions. They
It's-
wouldn't have to negotiate 500
But I
some
think what
contracts.
it is contrary to is a very long history in New York of this concept of local control.
Right.
And it's interesting you point out that, I mean, New York City is the largest school system in the country, right?
Half the kids in the state.
And
are
I can
in
tell
one
you so
district.
much of the political dynamic in a place like suburban Long Island is we're not New York City, right?
Right.
That's why we're out here, and
Right.
because we have these wonderful local school districts and so on. But it's always the challenge, right? So when people do complain about the cost, because you look at the 50 some odd districts in Nassau County alone, everyone's got a superintendent, how many assistants,
Right.
and the districts are not, the sizes could be, a couple thousand to whatever. I got the latest stats.
There
Is
are
the largest
districts
school.
in upstate that have 500 kids in the
Yeah,
whole district.
very small.
Yeah,
I mean, the
yeah.
island, same thing. So, obviously, if you were drawing the map of our school districts today, you wouldn't have the
Right.
boundaries that we have. But changing that,
Yeah.
or
I know.
it's just there's a lot to unravel there.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll happen.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll happen.
If you left the districts intact, but had the contracts be regionalized.
Well, I mean, I've always argued, actually, one of my other bills that Ken could have pulled out is that we put, which I think passed actually, to make it easier for districts to share administrative costs,
Right.
but keep the district intact. But the theory was share a superintendent and share some of the assistants.
purchasing
And yeah, well, I mean, IT services,
Right.
busing, insurance, fuel.
Right.
Some of this is happening,
yeah,
but not to the extent that it could.
right.
Right, and then you remove yourself from the debate of, we want our own high school team, and look, we have to be honest too. It's in some places it is a question of the demographics of a community,
Right.
and some folks don't want to be thrown in with other folks. I mean, that's the
Oh, I
ugly
know. When
the
it's,
ugly part of the
you know,
conversation, right?
I mean, there was a local district here, I won't name it, but it's, it graduates maybe 10, 12 kids a year.
Yeah.
Sits in between two much larger districts,
Yeah.
and the parents were asked, the taxpayers were asked by vote whether or not they wanted to merge with one of the other, and they said no,
No,
we
yeah.
don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And they were willing to raise their property taxes to build a whole new school complex
Yeah.
for a school that's graduating, a handful of kids.
Yeah.
Now, I get it. There's,
Well, I remember when I was on the school board, we actually sent one year a letter out. I think it was the year we had a superintendent retiring, if I'm remembering, to all of our neighboring districts to see if they wanted to talk about a merger. Nobody wanted to talk.
yeah.
Mineola wasn't viewed, I guess,
Yeah.
as a good
It
partner.
is one of those hyper.
We were surrounded by much more affluent communities,
Yeah.
and I guess they looked at us like,
I
stepchildren.
I
or
think that's a
something,
mistake, though. I mean, I think like I was a public defender, and I will say this: I think that in some of the communities where I represented kids, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, before raised age, all of that, a lot of times they had no exposure to anyone
Yeah.
who, had a two-parent, both working household.
Yeah.
And I think that's unfortunate
Yeah.
because, peer groups matter. And I think it's good on both ends of the equation for kids who are very affluent to be exposed to kids who come from different backgrounds.
Yeah.
I think the military actually did that for some people.
Interesting, yeah.
That we don't really have that experience
Right.
anymore, and
Yeah.
it's too bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it turns out, just because someone is not wealthy doesn't mean they're not a nice person.
Right,
And
right.
just because someone's wealthy doesn't mean they're not a nice person,
Right, right.
So, but anyways, that has nothing to do with business, so.
But I think isn't it one of the challenges of how we're living today, right? We get into our own little,
Yeah, it's so silent.
and reinforced by social media in a negative way as well. It's a real problem.
I think people are afraid to disagree with others or be disagreed with,
Yeah.
and that's too bad.
Everything gets hyped up.
Well, if you're right all the time, I'm scared.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'm not right all the time.
But the inability to have thoughtful conversations anymore. I mean, the polarization is so extreme.
Yeah.
I mean, there were always differences. I mean, again, not to harken back to what may be ancient history or something, but the Vietnam War was an incredibly divided concept of people.
Right.
And within families, there were very, very sharp differences. But I feel the conversations today they're just so hypercharged. And it's the other thing that everybody talks about all the time. We don't have a common source of information anymore. So we're getting bits and pieces that tend to reflect our own biases. When we have 3 networks, and when I was growing up, you had
Right.
Walter Cronkite or whoever your favorite anchor was. People read newspapers. You can't even find newspapers half the time anymore. And if you're just going to go on your phone, you kind of breeze through. You look at an article, it's interesting, but you don't get the whole array. And a lot of the newspapers don't even have. Look, you go to the Capitol, the LCA area. You don't have the staff you had when you and I started.
True. I know, that's true.
They
Yeah.
don't have the resources, or you talk to a reporter and it's like, well, what do you think of this? You give a quick answer. Okay, fine. But the kind of deep dive analysis that you used to see more of with journalism, they don't have the resources for it. I guess there's not the audience for it. I don't know. So that's dumbing everything down a bit, and also creating more of that polarization and an ability for us to meet halfway to find that middle ground or common ground, whatever the word is.
Well, yeah, and you have to, now with social media and sound bites and everything, it's like you have to know your position right away.
Right.
And,
Oh, yeah.
and God forbid you should ever change your mind about anything if you're an elected
Right.
official, right?
Right.
So-
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't evolve. You can't grow. It's hard, and the issues change every because we fall into that, right? Some horrible things happen. We have to tweet. You're the last one to tweet. How could you not?
Right.
You don't even know sometimes what you don't even have the full information,
Yeah.
right? And yet you have to. If you don't have a reaction, you're left behind, or
Right.
you're not responsible, or you're not sensitive, or you're not. We all get caught up in that. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's true.
It's sad.
We need to stop doing that.
We won't, though, because we can't. I mean, that's the reality of what we're the time that we're living in, and I think that's also why you have that other large group of people that just tune everything out.
Yeah.
It's overload, So that's the concern I have, is that you have a lot of folks that aren't included in it at all. Does that mean they're not going to vote, or when they vote, what are they voting on? So I the days of the great debates, I think, are long gone, unfortunately.
Yeah, which is too bad because it was, you can learn a lot by watching a debate. And I think you can learn a lot about people. I always like the fact that, some of the people in radically different universes, Ed Koch, I think at one point said, if you agree with me on 12 out of 12 issues, you need a psychiatrist.
Right.
If you agree with me on 9 out of 12, you should vote for me.
Right, right.
And Ronald Reagan, if we agree on 75% of issues, we're friends. We're 75% friends, or we're not enemies.
Right.
We just don't agree on everything. But
Right.
I think that we've lost that somehow.
Yes, I agree.
There's sort of litmus tests, and it's too bad. And as you pointed out, I will never run for governor with a education platform as I suggested. But the thing is that, being able to put ideas out there are the way we're going to find solutions to
Right.
some of the sort of entrenched problems that we
Yeah,
have. And
yeah.
we have to be able to talk about things that people think are scary.
Right. Yeah.
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 But,
yeah.
you
And I
have
think
the
we'll get-
scariest job.
And I think we'll get to that point again. By
Yeah.
the way, I'm not. People say, "Why? I'm running again. Why are you doing it?" I think this is such a challenging time, but we'll get through this time.
Yeah.
And I think we will get to a better place. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. And I do think there's going to be a couple more years of a very challenging political environment. But nothing stays forever. I mean, I still have faith in our system. I still have faith in New Yorkers. I have faith in the American people. We're just going through a rough patch. We've had rough patches before, and I think we'll get to. I just believe we'll get to a better place. I just think we'll have to hang in there. Just try to do the best that we can in our own way, whether it's in the workplace, or at home,
Right.
or in the public arena. As you're in and I'm in. Just try to be mindful of the fact that there are no simple answers. We need to come up with solutions that benefit the greatest number of people possible, and do it in a thoughtful way. And I think if enough of us keep that spirit alive, it'll get back to a better place. It's got to. Right. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I so appreciate you taking
This
the
was
time.
fun.
It was a very
Thank you.
positive note. I like
Yes.
that.
Well, we
And,
have to stay positive, right? That's
yes,
why
we
you
do.
do what you do. It's why
Yeah.
I do what I do.
Yeah, I actually believe that we can make New York more prosperous,
Yeah.
better place for business. It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
But we have to have that spirit of we're going to do it together.
Yes,
That's how we
yes.
get to that better place.
Thank you.
It's always a privilege to work with you, Heather, and your team. So thank you for the great work that you and the Business Council that you do day in and day out.
All right. Thank you, Tom DiNapoli, Comptroller.
This has been a presentation of the Connect podcast, produced by the Business Council, the voice of employers in New York State.